Good day, everybody. Welcome to Practical Research 2. So this is a supplementary video for Practical Research 2, Self-Instructional Packet 1, titled Quantitative Research Kinds and its Importance. So this video will serve as a guide for you in accomplishing your Module 1 in Practical Research 2. So let me introduce myself first. So I am your Sir Relly D. Castro, and I will be your teacher for Practical Research 2. Make sure that you have your modules for Practical Research 2. Before we start, let us take a look at the general instructions of the module. So for the general instructions, whenever you see this mark, so the exclamation point, remember that you have to answer all the questions, drills, activities, and assessment on a separate sheet of paper. So you are going to be using a separate sheet of paper for your answers. Don't write anything on your modules. Now, the modules will be submitted in the designated drop boxes located on your barangay hall. Do not forget to include your name, grade, and section, part of the SIP you're answering, date of submission, and complete answer for all the tasks given. Also, have your answer sheet signed by your parents. Okay, remember, there is no need for you to copy the questions on the answer sheet. Just make sure that you follow the instructions properly and write your answers legibly. In doing this, follow the template and example found below. So read the general instructions carefully. Okay, so you can pause this if you want to read it again. Now, the title of our lesson for today is Quantitative Research Kind and its Importance. At the end of this lesson, you should be able to describe the characteristics, strengths, weaknesses, and kinds of quantitative research, and also illustrate the importance of quantitative research across fields and the application of quantitative research in daily life. Now, let's proceed with your first activity. So let us read this. In Practical Research 1, you have studied about qualitative research. Now, during qualitative research or Practical Research 1, you are very familiar with the characteristics of qualitative research. Now, our subject is Practical Research 2, which will be dealing with quantitative research. The first question is, do you think that quantitative research has similarities and differences with qualitative research? For us to clearly see how they are similar and different, I want you to write the descriptions you have in mind regarding these two types of research inside the Venn diagram. So your first activity is going to be identifying the similarities and differences of quantitative and qualitative research. So ang gagamitin nyo rito is the Venn diagram. So this is the Venn diagram. So I hope everybody is familiar with the Venn diagram. So what you're going to do is you are going to be writing the characteristics of qualitative research here and the characteristics of quantitative research here. Okay, after doing that, you are now going to write the similarities of qualitative research and quantitative research on this space. Okay, so you can pause this video, do this activity, and then we'll proceed with the next activity. Okay, so let's proceed with the next activity. Now, for the next activity, okay, we are going to be using these two pictures. So the title of the activity is Decoding Picture. So take a look at the two pictures. So the first picture is like a drawing, a blueprint. It's what seems to be a house. And the other picture is the picture of the Manila City Hall. So take a look at the two pictures and then try to answer two questions below. Question number one is, which of the picture will use numerical data? Explain in 30 to 40 words. So choose between the two pictures, what do you think will be using a numerical data? And explain why it will be using a numerical data. Explain your answer in 30 to 40 words. Now, in question number two, which specific field of your discipline, STEM, ABM, Humes, GAS, PBL, can we use numerical data? Explain in 30 to 40 words. So for question number two, you are going to be thinking of a specific field in your discipline. For example, STEM. Ang napili nyo is engineering. Okay, why do you think engineering uses numerical data? Explain your answers in 30 to 40 words. Again, we can pause this video, proceed with the activity. After doing that, we'll proceed with the next activity. Okay, now let's proceed to the next activity. So for this activity, I want you to look at the graphs. Okay, so the graph is the forecast of COVID-19 in the Philippines using a recent 5-day average transmission rate. So upon looking at the graph, I want you to answer two questions. Okay, question number one, what are the data presented in numerical form? So based from the graph, what data do you think are represented by a numerical format. Okay? And question number two, why do the Department of Health rely more on numerical data compared to non-numerical data in reporting the cases of COVID-19 in the Philippines? So I want you to write down your reasoning or your opinion on why the Department of Health rely more on numerical data when it comes to reporting the cases of COVID-19 in the Philippines. Again, pause the video. Then, after that, let's proceed with the next activity. Okay, now for the next activity, so below is a diagram of the types of research according to their methodology. Copy the correct characteristics based on your understanding to the diagram to complete the ideas of the concept map. So what we have here is what we call as a concept map. Okay, so the title of the concept map is type of research according to methodology. So we have three boxes. So the first box is qualitative. Okay, the second box is quantitative, and the third box is mixed. So what are you going to do is you are going to be listing down, you're going to list down the characteristics of qualitative, quantitative, and also characteristic which is present on both qualitative and quantitative. So, saan nyo kukunin yung sagot nyo? So, this is where you're going to be getting your answer. So, you have characteristic 1, characteristic 2, characteristic 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So, you need it. It is already printed on your module. So, ang gagawin nyo na lang, ilalagay nyo na lang yung which one belongs to which. Okay? So, again, pause the video, and then we'll proceed with the next activity. Okay, now, upon doing those activities, you already have a familiarity. Okay, you already have what they call this a little bit of an idea about quantitative research. Now, let's talk about quantitative research design. So, a design refers to the overall strategy that you choose in order to integrate the different components of the study in a coherent and logical way, thereby ensuring you will effectively address the research problem. So what do we mean by that? Now, whenever you use a quantitative research, the first step is deciding which research design that you're going to be using. Research design is how can I say, a blueprint. It's the blueprint of your research. It's wherein that is the deciding factor for the selection, measurement, and analysis of data. So that will serve as your guide in doing your quantitative research. Now, quantitative research design are generally classified into experimental and non-experimental. So pag-uusapan natin yung experimental and non-experimental and what they are for. First is the experimental research design. In experimental research design, this allows the researcher to control the situation. It means that you have full control of the research itself. Now, in experimental research design, we try to answer what causes something to occur. This kind of research also allows the researcher to identify the cause and effect relationship between variables. To put it this way, what will happen if something occurs? So that's what we mean by experimental research design. So we have two types of experimental research design. You have your true experimental research design. I'm sorry about the typographical error. Letter A is true experimental research design, and letter B is quasi-experimental research design. So what's the difference between the two? In a true experimental research design, it controls both time-related and group-related threats. So a major characteristic of a true experimental research design is it has three major characteristics. First is manipulation, second is in control, and three is randomization. So what do we mean by this? So pag sinabi nating manipulation, the researcher has full ability to manipulate the variables of the study. Okay? So that is why there is manipulation. Let's say you are doing a scientific experiment wherein you want to determine the rate of evaporation of water comparing it to the heat applied. So you have full control of the heat being applied to the water, and then you measure the rate of evaporation. So what do we mean? That's what we mean by manipulation. The second one is your control. Control means that you have both control and experimental group. So meron tayong dalawang grupo dyan, isang control group at isang experimental group. It means that control group is the group that you're not going to be applying any manipulation. Okay? While in the experimental group, that is a group wherein you're going to be applying your manipulation. And then you compare your data. Now, the third characteristic of a true experimental research design is yung tinatawag natin na randomization. So, in randomization, you randomly pick your sample. Okay? So, gano'n ang ibig sabihin ng true experimental research design. So, an experimental design can only be said to be true if the three characteristic is present. Okay? Now, the second type of your experimental research design is what we know as quasi-experimental research design. So what do we mean by the term quasi? Quasi means almost but not yet. Okay? Almost but not yet. So, a basic characteristic of quasi-experimental research design is it is done without any random pre-selection process. It means that you still have your manipulation, you still have your control group and experimental group, but the one thing that is missing is yung randomization. Okay? For example, to perform an educational experiment, a class might be arbitrarily divided by alphabetical selection or by seating arrangement. So, therefore, there is no randomization. Okay? So, that's what we mean by quasi-experimental design. Both true and quasi-experimental design is commonly used in scientific experimental research. Okay, now, the second type of your quantitative research design is yung tinatawag natin na non-experimental design. In this kind of design, the researcher observes the phenomenon as they occur naturally and no external variables are introduced. In a non-experimental research design, there is no manipulation. Okay? So you cannot manipulate your variables. Non-experimental research design is also known as your descriptive research design. So in descriptive research design, the main purpose is only to observe, describe, and document. You are not allowed to manipulate your variable, unlike in experimental research design. Now, we have several types of non-experimental research design. So ano yung mga yon? First one is you have your survey. Second one is you have your correlational. Third one is you have your ex post facto or causal comparative. Fourth one is comparative. Fifth one is normative. Sixth one is evaluative. And the last one is yung methodological. So, let's talk about it one by one. Ano ba yung mga yan? Okay? First is yung tinatawag natin na survey research design. The survey research design is useful when the objective of the study is to see the general picture of the population under investigation. So, what do we mean by that? It's quite simple. So, I think most of you are familiar on how survey is done. Let's say you want to know, okay? So, you want to know the number of students that has a Facebook account. So, in Comparative National High School, you want to know the number of students that has a Facebook account. So, anong gagawin nyo? You're going to be performing the survey. You're going to count, bibilangin nyo, tatanungin nyo yung tao, and then bibilangin nyo sino-sino ang merong Facebook account. Because of that, you're going to have a general idea, okay, about which, or percentage rather, percentage of students in Cabiao National High School that has a Facebook account or not. So, ganun ibig sabihin ng survey. The next one is tinatawag natin na correlational. Correlational is conducted by researchers whose aim would be to find out the direction, association, and or relationship between variables or group of respondents under study. So in correlational research design, your aim is to know the relationship, okay, the relationship between variables or groups. For example, okay, children of wealthier, better educated parents earn higher salaries as adults. So in this particular studies, you are going to determine if there is a relationship between wealth and better education to higher salaries as adults. I'll give you another example. Another good example is if you want to know the relationship between study habits and academic performance. May kinalaman ba yung study habits sa grades ng isang estudyante? So that's what we mean by correlational. You're trying to look for relationship between your variables. Okay, the third one is what we know as ex post facto. Ex post facto is a little bit complicated. So this kind of research derives conclusion for observation and manifestations that already occurred in the past and now compared to some dependent variable. The easiest way to explain this is in ex post facto, there is supposedly a common denominator for your respondent. Okay? So, an example is a researcher is interested in how weight influences stress coping levels of adults. Here, the subject should be separated into different groups. Underweight, normal, and overweight. Their stress coping levels are measured. So, this is an ex post facto because we have a pre-existing characteristic or a common denominator for all the respondent. Ano yun? That is weight. Okay, if there's a common denominator among the respondents, ang tawag natin doon is ex post facto. Okay? Now, the next one is yung comparative research design. The comparative research design involves comparing and contrasting two or more samples of study subjects on one or more variable, often at a single point in time. So as the name implies, in comparative research design, you are going to compare. When we say we compare, we are trying to look for similarities between two or more samples or subjects. Okay? Hindi lang comparing, we are also going to be doing contrasting. Contrasting is looking for differences naman. For example, a comparative study on the health problems among rural and urban people in Ilocos region, Philippines. So, in this particular study, you are trying to compare, okay, health problems between rural and urban people. So, ano ba ang pagkakamuka? Ano ba ang pagkakaiba ng problema sa kalusugan ng mga taong nakatira sa rural at ang mga taong nakatira sa urban sa Ilocos? So that's what we mean by comparative. Okay? The next one is your normative. In normative research design, we are just trying to describe the norm of level of characteristics of a given behavior. So take note of the keyword behavior. So we're just going to be studying a behavior, okay, or characteristics of your sample. For example, you are conducting a research on the study habits of high school students and how it can actually affect the academic performance of students. So since study habits is behavior, so it is known as a normative research design. Okay. Now, the next one is evaluative. Evaluative, it is a process used to determine what has happened during a given activity or in an institution. So in evaluative, as the name implies, you are trying to evaluate the effectivity of a certain program. Okay, that was applied in an institution or in a community or a group of people. Naging effective ba or hindi. A good example of this is the K-12 program, okay, ng Department of Education. So, we can determine if the K-12 program has been successful or not by using evaluative research design. Okay? And of course, the last one is methodological. In this approach, the implementation of a variety of methodologies forms a critical part of achieving the goal of developing a scale-match approach where data from different disciplines can be integrated. So, pag sinabi natin methodological, it's mixed. So, you are not tied down to a single research design. Okay? You're not tied down to a single research design. You can use combination of different research designs in order for you to achieve your goal. For example, you can use survey in combination with ex post facto or comparative in combination with correlational. So that's what we mean by methodological. So those are the different research design under non-experimental research design. Okay. Now, let's proceed with your next activity. Now, using the table below, complete the data needed in the graphic organizer to give rise to the different types of quantitative research in the different areas of living. So, in this particular activity, what you're going to do, ang gagawin nyo dito is, okay, so you're going to use the type of quantitative research. So, I list down three here: correlational, experimental, and comparative. And then you are going to choose a field under your study. For example, in correlational, ang field na napili nyo is medical. What do you think is the importance of correlational research in medical field? Okay, so ganun lang kadali yun. So, ano yung importance? So, knowing the relationship activities of daily living to genetic diseases like hypertension. So, yun yung importansya ng correlational research sa medical. Okay? So, you can pause the video and proceed with the activities before we proceed with the next activity. Okay, let's proceed. Now, for the next activity, I want you to answer briefly the following question based on the lessons presented. So, sagutin niyo yung tanong base dun sa mga napag-aralan natin. Now, question number 1, what are the main differences between quantitative and qualitative research? List down 3. Okay, so question number 2, do you think quantitative research is a much appropriate design for your specific discipline? Okay, or problem. Explain your answer in 30 to 40 words. Okay. Now, for your next activity, so this will be our assessment. So, I want you to write the specific type of research being pertained in the following statement. So, I want you to identify if what is being described quantitative or qualitative. So, isulat nyo lang kung quantitative or qualitative yung dinidescribe doon sa iba't ibang statements. Okay, and for our last activity, you are going to be doing tinatawag natin na journal critic. So, I want you to look for quantitative research journal online sa internet, if possible. Okay, so the journal must be within the 5-year prescription. It means that kailangan yung edad ng journal is 5 years old pa lang. And I want you to complete the data using the template provided below. So, what is the title of the research na nakita nyo? Kailan siya pinublish? What is the research problem? Anong research design yung ginamit? What are the sample or population? Sino yung mga population involved? Anong statistical tool ang ginamit? At anong instrument ang ginamit? Okay, so yun yung gagawin nyo for the journal critic. Okay, now, ano yung brief result of the research study? I want you to write it in 40 to 50 words and answer this question. What will be the importance of this research to you as a senior high school student and to the society in the future? So write your answer in 40 to 50 words only. Okay? So that ends our supplementary video for your Practical Research 2 Module 1. So good luck in answering the video and I will see you again on our next module. Thank you to all.